Hello and welcome back to Mastering English Podcast, the place where we break down English for you. Not just, the grammar and the rules, but the mindset, the strategies that actually help you level up. I'm your host, Alex.
And I'm Sam. It's good to be here, everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. We're going to get into what it really takes to transform your language journey from, well, a chore into something really powerful.
I have to start today with a confession.
Yeah.
I've been really trying to focus on my new vocabulary, but this past week, wow, I found myself completely depleted.
Oh, yeah? How come?
Not because I was studying too hard. It was because I was spending all this time trying to explain why I was studying to people who they just didn't get it. I was defending my choices, justifying my time, and just feeling that constant draining pressure.
That sounds like mental exhaustion. It's that constant noise inside your head, right? You hit that wall where you're tired of explaining yourself, you're tired of pleasing people, you're tired of all the noise around you.
Yeah.
And that stops you from focusing on the actual journey, on the English learning, because all your mental resources are just being spent somewhere else.
Exactly. I realized that energy drain is so real, and I think it completely impacts my ability to learn. I mean, how can I learn new verbs if I'm in my head rehearsing a debate with my family about my career choices? It's impossible.
Well, you've just hit on the core mission for today's deep dive. We're going to explore the unexpected power of choosing silence.
Choosing silence, I like that.
Yeah, we looked at a whole stack of sources, psychology articles, language acquisition studies, even some personal development stuff, and they all link this idea of mental quiet, of self-focus, directly to learning a language more effectively and building confidence.
So we want to show you, our listener, how protecting your emotional energy and building confidence are, well, surprisingly, two of the most effective language learning strategies you could possibly adopt. It's all connected.
It is all connected. We're going to link the psychological power of silence with the linguistic power of focused input. We'll even show how cutting out unnecessary drama translates directly into freeing up the working memory you need for grammar, for faster comprehension.
And speaking of retention and speed, here's a little teaser to keep you hooked. We are going to give you a pop quiz later on one of the biggest myths in language learning, something that confuses almost every B1 student. Can just watching English Netflix with subtitles while, you're texting a friend, does that actually count as learning, or is that just passive listening? We're going to test you later on the critical difference between active and passive learning.
And we'll give you the research-backed strategies to maximize both. That distinction is key, and it all comes back to how you mentally engage, or, crucially, how much silence you allow yourself.
Before we jump in, if you value learning English quickly, thoroughly, and with these kinds of insights, we have one mandatory request for you. Please subscribe to Mastering English Podcast and like this episode right now. It really helps other curious learners find us.
Yep, hit that subscribe button. We are about to shift your entire mindset.
Okay, let's unpack this whole noise problem, starting with the psychological side of it. Our first big idea is how choosing silence instantly shifts attention back to where it belongs. On your learning goals. We're calling this silence shifts the spotlight.
Right. This starts with what one source called the illusion, this very natural human tendency to feel like we are always on a stage, that we're always performing.
Oh, I know that feeling.
In social psychology, it's actually called the spotlight effect. We massively overestimate how much other people are paying attention to our appearance, our behavior, and especially our mistakes.
That is the exact feeling. Like you drop a spoon in a quiet cafe and you're instantly thinking, oh my God, everyone is looking at me. Or even worse, when you're trying to speak English in a group and you stumble over a word, you just feel this wave of heat because you imagine this huge audience is judging every single tiny error.
Exactly. And you waste so much precious mental energy worrying about that judgment. One of the sources had a great story, actually. A learner was talking about being in class, taking notes, and just being convinced that everyone was judging their messy handwriting, only to realize later that no one cared. Everyone else was completely hyper-focused on their own note-taking, not theirs.
That's the reality check we all need, isn't it? So if the spotlight effect is an illusion, what's the reality?
The reality is, honestly, it's a little comforting. Most people are just far too busy thinking about themselves. No one is watching you as closely as you think they are.
Right.
And all that wasted energy, that mental rehearsal of arguments and justifications, that should be channeled into positive self-focus, into your learning.
That makes so much sense. So when you stop explaining and defending your choices, like why you're spending a Friday night studying instead of going out, The performance just ends. And you realize the stage was only in your mind.
Precisely. The performance ends because the audience leaves. And silence makes you free to concentrate on the actual work. It lets you move the attention off this perceived external judgment and back onto your internal study habits. This is so crucial for B1 learners who often have a really high, what we call affective filter. It's an anxiety filter.
We'll definitely have to talk about that later. But first, let's zoom in on that word you used, spotlight. Wait, that's a cool word. I've heard spotlight in movies and stuff, but I never really got it, especially in this context of attention or like performance anxiety.
Spot on. So a spotlight literally is a strong, focused beam of light, in a theater to light up one person on stage. It makes them the center of attention for the whole audience.
Okay.
But when we use it figuratively in conversation, it just means the center of attention or focus. It means everyone is watching you and your actions.
Got it. Okay, since our listeners are B1, can you give us those 3 distinct examples with a bit more context?
Of course. Let's start with a formal one, something you might hear in a business setting. 1. Formal. The successful CEO was constantly in the spotlight after the merger, largely due to the unexpected profit margins and all the media attention. 2. Casual. Ugh. I hate being put on the spotlight during family dinners when my aunt asks really loudly about my progress learning English. It just makes me too nervous to speak. 3. And for a funny one, my cat often tries to steal the spotlight during my video calls by walking directly across the keyboard and, muting the microphone right in the middle of an important meeting.
The last one is so relatable. Okay, let's try a quick scenario role play. Let's hear it in action, linking it back to that anxiety we talked about. Put me on the spot here. So I'm really nervous about my oral exam next week. I just feel like everyone, the professor included, will be watching my every mistake. I am dreading the pressure of being in the spotlight.
I know that feeling. But remember, you have control over how much you engage with that pressure. Try to focus only on the task, not the people watching. You need to mentally shift the spotlight away from the judgment and put it firmly onto the content you've prepared.
Okay, so my goal is to focus on delivering my presentation, not just surviving the intense spotlight of the room.
Yeah.
That shift in perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, that really helps reduce the anxiety.
Perfect usage. And let's quickly look at those common combinations or collocations we use. You'll often hear in the spotlight, which means currently being watched.
Right.
Or stealing the spotlight, which is taking attention away from someone else. And the mental strategy we're talking about today. Shifting the spotlight.
Shifting the spotlight.
Yeah.
That is going straight into my mantra list.
Yeah.
It's all about control, which leads perfectly to our next point on why this control is so necessary. It's about protecting your energy.
Precisely. Let's move on to point 2, protecting energy and ending drama.
Okay, so the sources talk about something they call the confidence paradox. We usually think of silence as being weak or awkward, We feel this need to rush in and talk just to fill a gap or to defend ourselves.
That's a very human feeling, but the paradox is that silence, it actually builds strength. It shows you're not rushing to prove yourself. It shows self-assurance. When you're quiet, you're observing, you're listening, and you only speak when it really matters.
And when that naturally quiet person finally does speak, everyone stops to listen. Their words have weight. And that's real confidence, right? Not needing constant loud approval.
That is the key takeaway. But the most practical part of this is how silence creates a sort of psychological barrier against what we call draining people.
The energy vampires. Okay, define draining people for us, and let's talk about the specific cost. What do they take from you?
So these are the people who constantly seek advice or attention, or they just want to complain and offload their emotional baggage. They often leave you feeling exhausted and unable to focus on your own stuff. And the source material is really clear on this. Explaining yourself to them is often useless. They don't actually want a solution. They just want to consume your time and your emotional bandwidth.
I remember that long explanation I gave a friend about why I couldn't go out. After that hour-long call, I felt completely drained. It just stole all the mental energy I had planned to use for studying my irregular verbs.
And that brings us to the core mechanism here, cognitive load theory. When you are emotionally managing or rehearsing a conversation, worrying, defending yourself, dealing with drama, you are using up your cognitive bandwidth.
What's cognitive bandwidth?
It's the mental space in your working memory that you need to process new information, like new English vocabulary or complex grammar.
So when I'm dealing with all that emotional management stuff, I'm literally stealing resources from my English learning brain.
You are. The energy that goes into managing drama is energy that cannot be used for language acquisition. And that's why silence acts as a kind of shield. It protects your precious peace and saves your energy for the people and goals that actually matter, like deep language study.
And the most incredible part of this section was how silence just ends drama. The source said drama lives on reaction, like a fire needing oxygen.
That's such a powerful analogy, isn't it? Drama needs your replies, your anger, your arguments to keep going. The moment you stop reacting, if you refuse to argue or defend or explain, the drama just starves and dies.
You take away its fuel source.
Exactly. By staying quiet, you protect your inner world and you maintain control.
And that massive energy loss is why we need to unpack our next vocabulary target.
Drained, exhausted. Let's talk about the difference, especially the emotional side of it.
Good call. It's a crucial distinction. Both drained and exhausted mean to be made very, very tired, to lose all your physical or mental energy. But exhausted is often more general. It can be physical or mental.
Whereas drained carries this really strong feeling of having your energy taken away by something external, like a difficult person or a demanding task or a long explanation. It's a really good word for emotional fatigue.
I can feel that, like an internal sucking sound.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, give us the examples, emphasizing that emotional context.
1. Formal. The long negotiation process, characterized by persistent emotional demands, left the entire team mentally exhausted and needing a therapeutic debriefing. 2. Casual. After talking to him for an hour about all his complaints, I felt completely drained. I literally had no motivation left to even start my language homework. 3. Funny weird. I was exhausted just thinking about the sheer volume of emails waiting for me, so I decided to take a 5-minute power nap before even opening my laptop.
I definitely understand being too tired to even start. Okay, let's try the skit on this energy drain. This is tough because my first instinct is always to argue or explain. Ugh, I can't study tonight. I just spent 2 hours trying to explain to my coworker why I need to leave work at 5 p.m. sharp for my English class, and now I feel completely drained.
Oh, be careful with the grammar there. You're feeling drained, like all the liquid has been sucked out. You should have used your silence shield. You have to protect your study energy, or you'll be too exhausted to make any progress.
You're right. I am completely drained because the argument was so taxing. I feel like I'm running on fumes right now.
Excellent recovery. That idiom, running on fumes, is perfect. It means being extremely tired, like a car running on the last few drops of gas. And for collocations, just remember, emotionally drained, physically exhausted, and that great idiom, running on fumes.
I'm officially adding running on fumes to my active vocabulary list. It captures that deep fatigue perfectly.
Use it.
Yeah.
Now, let's move from protecting your current peace to protecting your future goals, because they also need quiet, controlled space to grow.
Point 3, keeping goals private and avoiding the blur. This is so motivational, and it's actually pretty counterintuitive for our social media age. The sources argue that sharing your goals too early just exposes them to criticism, to doubt, and to a kind of internal self-sabotage. They need space to grow strong without outside pressure.
This is a classic idea, and it's backed by research into motivation. When you announce a big goal, say, I'm going to run a marathon, or I'm going to pass the C1 English exam, your brain often feels like it's already achieved a small part of it.
How does that work?
Because you get the immediate social feedback, the praise, the applause, the congratulations. You get all that without doing any of the actual difficult work.
Wow. So the immediate feeling of being validated actually reduces the drive you need for the hard, quiet, repetitive work. That is fascinating and kind of scary.
It is. The psychological reward for announcing the intention replaces the reward for actual progress. And that's why the mantra should be something like, talk less, move more, let your results do the talking.
Yeah.
You don't need to post online that you're going to start studying for an exam. You just need to put your head down and study.
I can relate to this. I once announced I was going to write a novel. I got so much positive feedback about the idea that I never actually opened the writing program. I think I just felt satisfied talking about it.
That's the trap. When the time is right, you don't need to explain your dream. You just show the result, the fruit of all your quiet labor.
The sources also mentioned a very modern challenge here, avoiding the blur. It's about that devastating comparison cycle, comparing your real life, your messy, unedited daily study grind to other people's perfect highlight reels on social media. It makes your own path feel blurry or less valuable.
Right. The problem with the highlight reel is that it's usually just the cleanest, most successful few seconds of someone's life, expertly framed and edited. So you see their chapter 20, the fluency, the success, the travel, and you compare it to your chapter 2 where you're still struggling with verb tenses. That comparison is completely unrealistic, and it makes your genuine, small, personal achievements feel insignificant.
And that feeling of insignificance, that your efforts don't matter, is what causes the blur. It takes your focus off your own path and just throws you into self-doubt, which, again, it increases that dreaded affective filter.
Exactly. When your path feels insignificant, your motivation suffers, and you just get overwhelmed. We have to protect the clarity of our own goals.
Okay, let's unpack that concept, blur. We usually think of a blurry photo, but how does that word relate to goals and focus?
That's a great starting point. A blur is something that is unclear or indistinct. It's when things mix together and you lose focus and detail. In the context of life or goals, it means losing clarity about your own unique path because you're distracted by comparison or just by overwhelming activity.
Okay, give us the expanded examples.
1. Formal. The constant media coverage tends to blur the ethical issues surrounding the technology, making it challenging for consumers to make an informed decision. 2. Casual. When I spend too much time on my phone comparing my simple study schedule to famous online polyglots, my own small progress starts to blur, and I lose sight of my initial motivation. 3. Funny weird. My first few days traveling in a new country were just a noisy, confusing blur of new smells and foreign signs and terrible jet lag until I finally found a quiet park to gather my thoughts.
I like that it can be used for abstract concepts and also for those practical, overwhelming experiences. Let's role-play the social media comparison skit. I'm feeling the blur.
I've been scrolling social media for an hour. Everyone else seems to be traveling the world, speaking 3 languages perfectly. My own progress this week feels so slow and messy and insignificant. It's all becoming a blur.
Stop it right there. You are letting their manufactured highlight reel blur the genuine achievements of your own study block this morning. You successfully learned 10 new phrases. That is real. Put the phone down and find your clarity again. You're right. I need to get back to the real world and start looking at the manufactured blur. I have to protect the clarity of my own journey.
Excellent. The collocations here are pretty useful. Blur the lines, which means making the distinction between 2 things unclear, like work and rest.
Got it.
A blur of activity, meaning rapid, unclear movement. And, like we used, everything is a blur. Remember, clarity is currency in learning.
That connects everything back to finding your own internal pace and letting your goals grow in peace. But that process of change, it isn't always comfortable, is it? Especially for the people around us, which I think brings us to the next point.
Indeed. Point 4. Outgrowing people is a sign of growth. We have to talk about the relational cost of choosing silence and focus. When you start concentrating on a big goal like becoming genuinely fluent in English, your habits, your routines, your availability, they change dramatically.
This is where friends or even family sometimes step in and say, "You've changed." But they say it in a negative way, like they're accusing you of something, as if change is a bad thing.
And it's so important to remind yourself and the listener, growth requires change. You are not supposed to stay the same forever, especially not for the comfort of other people. If your new study schedule means you have to prioritize learning over weekend socializing, well, then that change is essential.
And your silence protects the person you are becoming. It's okay to let go of people who don't walk the same path anymore, or who actively try to pull you back to the old you who was always available or always explaining yourself.
You don't owe anyone the old version of yourself. This shift, this ability to set silent boundaries, it's a necessary part of leveling up, both personally and linguistically. It's the confidence you get from knowing your own value.
This sounds like a great candidate for our next vocabulary word. Can we unpack the phrase outgrow people? It's so visual.
Outgrow is a fantastic, highly versatile verb. Literally, it means getting too large for something, like a jacket you wore as a child. But when we use it figuratively, especially with people or habits, it means to become too mature or too advanced or too developed for something or someone.
So it forces you to leave old habits behind.
Exactly. It forces you to naturally leave those old habits or relationships behind as you evolve.
So it implies a natural, often positive progression, even if it feels a bit sad sometimes. Okay, let's hear those expanded examples.
1. Formal. The advanced learner had quickly outgrown the beginner's textbook and, needing a greater challenge, sought more complex academic material. 2. Casual. I finally outgrew the need for constant approval from my boss. I realized my personal development was way more important than their daily opinion. 3. And a funny one. I hope I outgrow my habit of starting every sentence with like one day, but my friends are still waiting for me to evolve past my teenage vocabulary.
That funny one hits close to home for anyone trying to reduce their filler words. Let's role-play the language sacrifice skit, focusing on how hard it is to set those boundaries. My friends keep inviting me out every Friday, but I need that time to study for my proficiency test. They get offended when I say no. They say I'm being antisocial.
It's hard to disappoint people, I get it, but you have to realize you are simply starting to outgrow that phase of constant socializing. Your new goal fluency, it requires focus and silence. This is a sign of healthy development.
I see. So I'm not being rude. I'm just outgrowing an old schedule for a new crucial purpose. I'm protecting my future self.
Exactly. The collocations here include outgrow a phase, outgrow a jacket, and outgrow a habit. You can use it as a kind of self-affirmation that your silence is enabling necessary evolution.
Okay, now that we've established the mental space needed for growth, the silence, the protected energy, let's apply this quiet focus directly to a concrete language strategy. Point 5. Active versus passive listening. This is where we deliver on that quiz promise.
Okay, let's unpack this in granular detail. Language learning relies on input, but the sources are really clear that it's a scale of engagement. It's not black and white. You have the extremes, passive background noise on one end and highly focused critical analysis on the other.
Most learners start with passive listening, right? They feel like they're maximizing time by putting on an English podcast while they're driving or watching Netflix with subtitles while scrolling on their phone. What exactly is the benefit of that passive exposure? What kind of knowledge does it build?
So passive listening is basically exposure to the language while your attention is split. You're listening without being forced to respond or fully concentrate. The major benefit, according to the research, is that it provides implicit, intuitive knowledge.
Implicit knowledge. What does that help with specifically for a B1 learner?
It helps a lot with training your ear. It builds familiarity with the sounds of the language, the intonation, the rhythm, the general speed, the correct pronunciation patterns, what linguists call phonotactics.
So it's like how babies learn.
It works in a similar way, yeah.
Right.
The language is just existing around them. You might intuitively know the correct pronunciation of a word because you've heard it 50 times passively, but you might not be able to use it yourself because you never really engaged with its grammar or meaning critically.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting for me. Active listening. If I'm sitting down, eyes on the screen, pen in hand, using that focused silence we talked about, what specific, deep skills am I developing that passive listening misses?
Active listening involves intentional, focused attention, deep cognitive engagement. This means you're listening very carefully, trying to critically analyze the vocabulary, the grammar rules, the structures being used. It requires silence and freedom from distraction, the exact mental resources you save by avoiding drama.
So what does active listening look like in practice? What are the techniques?
Well, there are several really powerful active techniques. One is microtranscription, where you listen to a short phrase, you pause it, and you write down exactly what you hear.
Okay.
Another one is shadowing, which is repeating after the speaker immediately to mimic their rhythm and intonation. You can also summarize what you've heard in your own words, which forces your brain to retrieve and reproduce the concepts.
And what kind of knowledge does that deeper active engagement give you?
That gives you explicit, retrievable knowledge. You're processing the language, not just hearing it. You're much more likely to be able to reproduce what you've heard, apply the grammar rules intentionally, and use the vocabulary accurately because you forced your brain to process it critically and store it in your long-term memory.
This reminds me of that fascinating study from the sources from 1996, right? It was a foundational piece of research that showed the power of active engagement.
Yes, that study showed a really clear, measurable difference. Students were divided into groups. One group was just exposed to the material, that's the passive group. The other group was explicitly taught techniques on how to listen actively.
What kind of techniques?
Things like specific note-taking strategies, using symbols to identify main ideas versus details, really engaging with the material.
And what was the outcome?
The results were dramatic. The group that was taught active listening techniques performed significantly better on comprehension, on recall, and on application tests, much better than the group that was left to passive listening alone. It tells us that focused effort, the silence and the mental bandwidth, is highly beneficial for faster, deeper, and more lasting improvement.
So the optimal strategy isn't choosing one or the other. It's the mix and match approach. But you have to prioritize that active time.
Exactly. Use passive listening when you're truly busy on the bus, at the gym, to maintain exposure and train your ear. That's for your implicit knowledge. But you must schedule dedicated blocks of active listening on the weekend, in the evening, to actively develop your explicit grammar and vocabulary.
That clarifies the distinction perfectly.
Hmm.
Now, let's talk about the danger of using the wrong material during these sessions. If the material is too hard, it just drains your cognitive load instantly.
That's the perfect segue to our next point. Point 6, the comprehensible input rule. This is so vital whether you're listening passively or actively.
Yeah, our sources repeatedly stress that if the input is incomprehensible, it's basically a waste of time. And it only contributes to that feeling of being drained. You can't just magically osmose the language.
That phrase, "you can't magically osmose it," is essential. If you're listening to something completely above your level, like a fast-paced news report when you're a B1 learner, your brain can't identify enough familiar patterns to figure out the new bits. It just becomes frustrating noise.
And that triggers that mental defense mechanism you mentioned earlier, the affective filter.
Right.
Wait, let's quickly define that jargon. What is the affective filter?
The affective filter is a concept from language acquisition theory. Think of it like an invisible wall. A wall of anxiety or stress or self-doubt that prevents new language from getting into the language acquisition part of your brain. When you're stressed or confused by input that's too hard, that filter goes up and learning stops.
That makes so much sense. If I'm stressing out because I don't understand half the words, my brain is preoccupied and that wall just goes straight up.
Precisely. And the goal of using comprehensible material is specifically to keep that wall down. And this brings us to the critical range supported by multiple studies. What is that sweet spot?
What is the number?
The critical range for language acquisition, known as the comprehensible input (CI) principle, is that the material works best when you understand about 75% to 95% of it.
That 75% to 95% range is the golden rule. It means you understand the context, the flow, the main ideas, but there's still enough new words or structures to challenge you and learn from the context.
Right. If you understand 100%, it's too easy. You should find something harder. If you understand less than 75%, say 50%, you'll get nowhere efficiently because you just don't have the context clues to decode the unknown stuff. It's the sweet spot for maximum acquisition with minimum stress.
The trick for our listeners, then, is finding material that sits perfectly in that 75 to 95% range. How can a B1 learner practically figure out if material is right for them?
That takes focused effort, which brings us back to silence and self-focus. A great strategy is the read first, listen second method. First, you read the transcript or any notes. If you understand about 80% of the text, then you listen to the audio. Preloading the vocabulary this way can push your comprehension up into that effective range.
That's highly actionable. Don't just jump into the deep end. Prepare the pool first.
Exactly. Or, for a purely listening task, if you realize within the first 2 minutes that you're understanding fewer than, say, 7 or 8 out of 10 sentences, just stop. Stop immediately and find something slower or simpler. Don't waste your precious protected energy on frustration.
Okay, let's stop and unpack our final vocab target. Comprehensible input, CI. This term is so foundational, let's make sure it's crystal clear in plain English.
For sure. Comprehensible input refers to any language material, audio, text, video, that is easy enough for you to largely understand, but still contains new vocabulary or structures. This lets you successfully figure out the unknown parts from the context, which is the key to language acquisition.
Okay, 3 expanded examples, please, highlighting how practical this is.
1. Formal. Educators must prioritize providing a high volume of comprehensible input to maintain low effective filters and maximize the student's success rate in the classroom. 2. Casual. Finding a slow English podcast that talks about topics you already know a lot about, like your job or hobbies, provides great comprehensible input because the context helps a lot. 3. Funny weird. Watching a fast-paced medical drama without subtitles when you're only a beginner is definitely not comprehensible input. It's just frustrating noise that makes you want to quit.
I have absolutely made that mistake of trying to watch intense shows and just feeling miserable afterward. Okay, let's role play searching for the right material. Okay, I want to start my active listening block now, but these fast-paced native interviews I found are way too hard. They're making my cognitive load hurt.
Stop watching those. They aren't comprehensible input for your level, and they are consuming all the energy you protected all day. Try searching for an easy English news summary or maybe a graded reader audiobook, something specifically designed to fit that 75–95% range.
I see. So the goal is to use my focused time and silence only on content where I understand enough to comfortably acquire the rest. It's all about efficiency.
That's the ticket. For collocations, remember, acquire language through CI, maximize input, and seek comprehensible content. This entire deep dive has been designed to help you create the mental conditions, the silence, and the focus to properly consume CI.
Wow, this has been an incredibly productive deep dive, blending self-focus with concrete learning strategies. Before we get to the quiz, let's address a common grammatical mistake we hear when people try to use our new vocabulary, specifically drained.
I was waiting for this. The usage of adjectives that come from verbs is tricky in English. Let's hear the common mistake.
Okay, I want to use the word drained correctly. So can I say, I am drained after work because of the drama?
That's a great question and a very common error for B1 learners. The simple answer is not quite. The verb is to drain. When you're describing your emotional or physical state, the result of the action, we treat the word like an adjective. And adjectives describing states often take the past participle form, the -ed ending.
Ah, okay, so I need the -ed ending. Why is that necessary grammatically?
Because if you say, I am drain, you're either using the infinitive verb, which doesn't describe your state, or you sound like you are the drain itself, the object that removes water. We need the -ed ending, drain, to show that the energy was removed from you. You are the passive recipient of the action.
That makes perfect sense. I am drained, or the meeting drained my energy. So what if I wanted to describe the activity itself? What would I use then?
Excellent follow-up. That's the difference between the past participle and the present participle. The drama is draining. That's the cause, the continuous action. I am drained. That's the result, the state.
The arguing is tiring. I'm tired.
Exactly. The conversation is draining. I am drained.
Perfect clarity. That distinction helps me use both forms correctly.
That's the goal.
All right, listeners. It is time to test your focus. It's the pop quiz we promised you at the start, covering the difference between active and passive learning and the comprehensible input rule.
I will quiz Alex and all of you based on the core linguistic concepts we discussed today.
Ready, ready. I have been paying active attention, so my explicit knowledge should be retrievable.
Okay, question 1. If you are just listening to content in the background while doing chores, that classic passive listening, does that primarily give you explicit retrievable knowledge or implicit intuitive knowledge?
Since I'm not critically analyzing it, it just trains my ear, that must be the implicit intuitive knowledge. It's the rhythm and the sound that sticks, not the grammar rules.
Spot on. The goal of passive listening is building implicit familiarity. Okay, question 2. To be considered truly beneficial, comprehensible input, where you are efficiently acquiring language and keeping that affective filter low, what is the ideal percentage range of content you should already understand?
I remember this critical data point. If it's too easy, it's useless, and if it's too hard, it's just frustrating noise. The ideal range is between 75% and 95% comprehensible.
That is absolutely correct. If you are learning effectively, you understand 75% to 95% of the material. That means you nailed the deep dive today.
Awesome. Okay, let's quickly review the core language we mastered today so our listeners can immediately integrate these words into their active vocabulary.
We covered 5 power words and concepts. We learned about the spotlight, the center of attention, and how silence shifts that attention away from perceived judgment.
We talked about feeling drained, exhausted, how important it is to protect your emotional energy from drama and demanding people, because drama starves on reaction.
And we look at the mental challenge of comparison, learning the word blur, which means losing clarity on your own goals when you focus too much on others' highlight reels.
We also talked about the necessity of change when you grow, defining the phrase outgrow people, leaving old habits and relationships behind as you develop, which is a sign of strength.
And finally, we defined that critical learning methodology. Comprehensible input, CI, which ensured your learning material is in that productive 75%, 95% sweet spot, keeping your cognitive load focused on acquisition.
Now for your micro challenge this week. Take 5 minutes of silent, focused time. Put your phone away, close your laptop, and reflect on one goal using one of the new words, like outgrow. Are you ready to outgrow one draining habit this week to focus on your English?
Embrace the power of that quiet focus. Remember, the quiet work is the real work.
And don't forget to like and subscribe to Master English Podcast. We appreciate you joining us on this deep dive and helping us grow the community.
We hope this episode helps you feel stronger, clearer, and more focused on your language journey.
I'm Alex. See you next time.
And I'm Sam.